Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have Congressman Dan Goldman on, a Democrat, represents New York's 10th District, serves on Judiciary Committee and Homeland Security. Representative Goldman, nice to see you. Thanks so much for joining, especially with the news with the Senate literally just voting a short time ago to pass this big billionaires bill. So,
Yeah, my pleasure, Dean. Always good to be with you. And yep, just learned I will be heading back to DC shortly.
so tell us, look, we don't know, none of us know what's in it completely because it's 900 plus bills. It literally just got voted on a short time ago. But the broad strokes, the bad broad strokes are confirmed. Cutting about $1 trillion from Medicaid and other places, SNAP. What's your reaction to the overarching to this giveaway to the rich at the expense of working class and poor Americans?
It's even worse. You thought that the big ugly bill coming out of the House was bad enough, $800 billion, cuts to Medicaid. 16 million Americans will lose their health care. More than millions of Americans will be ineligible for SNAP, which means that the most vulnerable will not be able to eat. That's what we're talking about here. And of course, then that's all not to reduce the deficit or get our fiscal house in order. It's just to allow for an increase in the deficit in the House bill of $2.4 trillion, which goes to continuing tax cuts for the super wealthy. There's an old saying, right? Show me your budget and you'll show me your priorities.
Right.
And what we are seeing is a just rampant effort to gaslight the American people. But it is so clear the priorities of this administration and this Republican Congress are billionaires, not babies. They are the super wealthy, not those who are just trying to get by and get access to the opportunity to succeed as the billionaires have. And I have no problem with people succeeding. That's what we want. But to continue to favor them, to give those at the top all the benefits and take them all away from those at the bottom is un-American. And this Senate bill is worse, Dean. It raises the deficit from 2.4 trillion more to 3.3 trillion more. The cuts to Medicaid go from 800 billion to $1 trillion. And the list goes on, but it is putting our budget, our fiscal situation in real dire straits. And of course, this is from the Republican Party, where we always hear about austerity and fiscal concerns. Yep, that all sounds good when there's a Democratic administration. And now, as we've seen for two successive Trump administrations, they don't care about that when it comes to tax cuts for the uber wealthy.
Do you have any sense, or can you share some insight? Look, it's adding $3 trillion to the deficit. They've got added another 800 million to the deficit and not hurt the most needy Americans, the most vulnerable Americans. It could have been slight cuts to Medicaid, a little bit here and there on SNAP. Instead, they really took a sledgehammer. According to the Kaiser Foundation, these are the biggest cuts in healthcare in the history of the modern era of American politics. So why not just add, look, if they're okay with 3 trillion, what's 3.8 trillion to be? And I'm not even kidding. I'm not joking. I'm like, why cause this pain when you're okay with 3 trillion? Just add a little bit more and don't cause the pain.
Well, you'd have to have empathy. You would have to care about the people you serve, not yourself and your special interests. You would have to recognize that our system is not equally accessible to everybody, and that what the American dream is all about is not perpetuating extreme wealth and wealth inequality, but actually giving everybody the opportunities to succeed. And the Republicans and Donald Trump simply do not care, do not have those qualities and values, and do not care about those things. And ultimately, that's reflected in this budget. And so the question boils down to, do you want to help the majority of Americans, or do you want to help the very few at the top of the ladder? And why it's not so obvious that we should be helping the majority of Americans, that as the wealthiest country in the world, we should have a baseline default social safety net where everybody can eat, everybody can be sheltered, everybody gets health care. This should not be complicated. It should be easy. And we don't need people with hundreds of billions of dollars while other people are taken away or have taken away $6 a day so they can eat. And that's what food stamps are.
Yeah.
And so it's disgusting. It's reprehensible, but I think most importantly, it is cruel and un-American. And I hope that the American people understand that, and they look at what the actions of the Republicans are, not what Donald Trump says, because he is a liar, right, left, and center. He lied to everybody on the campaign, and he is lying to everybody right now about this bill.
And you're right. Your first comment really hit at the fact that we share as Democrats values of compassion and empathy. On my show, I always say being a Democrat means caring about people that you've never met and you will never meet, but you still care about them. That doesn't happen in the GOP. It is a celebration of cruelty over and over. So, and with SNAP, 40% of the recipients are children. They're going to take food out of the mouth of children to give a tax cut to the wealthy. And they can sleep and they're fine with this. And they're celebrating this right now.
And I don't know whether they believe their own BS or how they rationalize it, because they seem to be very insistent that it makes sense to change the definition of a dependent child to a 7-year-old or under.
Mhm.
I got 5 kids, Dean. They're all 7 and older. They're all dependents. And the notion that from when you turn 8 years old, now you're not a dependent. And therefore, your parent has to work and at least 20 hours a week, even if that parent is not only taking care of the kids, but his or her parents, or has a disability or has, some impairment. It is remarkable that they can actually look themselves in the mirror and say, yeah, that makes sense that a 8-year-old is not a dependent. And that, by the way, just in New York, that alone eliminates 700,000 people from getting SNAP.
Wow. That's off. I'm Senator Congressman Dan Goldman. And, another thing here, Congressman, is that we're seeing the legislation now. And from what I read, it said the Senate package will roll back billions of dollars in green energy tax credits. And I think we all remember Trump having the oil tycoons at Mar-a-Lago, give me $1 billion and I'll give you everything you want. And it turns out from reporting, he got about $500,000 between him and the GOP from these oil tycoons. And here you go. These aren't donations. These are investments. And the investors are getting a return on their money right now.
The corruption is the feature, not the bug. And what really burns me up about the clean energy stuff is that if you look at the motto of Make America, America First and MAGA and all this stuff, right? Well, what do they talk about? They talk about 100% American manufacturing, bringing manufacturing back to America. They talk about lowering energy costs. They talk about foreign investment in our country. These clean energy subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act have created already more than 200, I think a couple 100,000 jobs and over $400 billion of investment. And it's all American manufacturing. It is increasing the supply of energy in order to reduce the price of energy. And it is providing subsidies, by the way, that exist already for oil companies. And they're taking that away just so they can feed the oil companies and keep essentially a monopoly within the oil and gas industry, even though, and by the way, of course, I haven't even discussed the climate benefits and the environmental benefits. Right. I'm only looking at it from their perspective, and it makes no sense from their own perspective. Of course, the climate benefits are tremendous and is an added value, but they obviously don't care about that. But even the stuff they care about, they are taking it away. And the last point I'll make on this, Dean, The vast majority of these credits and subsidies have gone to Republican districts and Republican states.
Wow.
They are literally taking away investment and jobs from their own constituents in order to placate the oil companies.
It's unbelievable. And there were some Republicans in the Senate who were against this because it did help their state and their constituents. And they ended up voting for the bill, most of them. So to shift gears, I saw you introduce legislation to ban ICE agents from wearing face masks. And it's a bigger picture. I mean, Donald Trump's literally at the alligator Alcatraz today, but celebrating and joking that if you want to escape, you're going to get eaten by an alligator. And the way he talks about immigrants, they're not human at all. And you have Tom Homan going, well, someone died. He goes, well, people die in prison all the time. An ICE person that was ICE confinement. And in the big picture here, it has to be concerning that this is dehumanization language. This is how you lay the groundwork for genocide. I mean, history warns us what's happening in front of us. So, I mean, the mask is one thing, but what is your big picture look at what they're doing, the dehumanization of millions of people who are in our country? Only 10% of criminal records of the ones they've deported. They're taking people here 40 and 50 years in this country, moms and dads, grandparents, putting them in an ICE facility in a penal colony.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's part of the reason why I think this legislation is so important. I have observed several different immigration courtrooms. I have seen people who are following the proper procedures, many of whom are here legally, of going through an asylum process. And asylum is a lawful pathway to come in here. They have work visas. They are working on the books. They are paying taxes. They are paying into Social Security. And they come out of these courtrooms after the Department of Homeland Security deceptively and deceitfully dismisses their case so that that asylum claim goes away. And for that very moment, they are not here legally. And they yank them with masks in plain clothes with no identification. And they put them in holding facilities for days and days that have no beds, that have one toilet, that have no showers, that are not intended for any of this. And it is, as you say, the pathway towards authoritarianism and dehumanizing immigrants. We are a country of immigrants, Dean. I'm sure you have a story. My grandmother escaped anti-Semitism to come here. And certainly we need to get control of our southern border, and we need to make sure that people are lawfully immigrating. But these are people, in many respects, who are lawfully immigrating. They're nonviolent. They're non-criminals. It's the exact opposite of what Donald Trump says. And the reason for the masks and the reason for the plain clothes is to instill that fear, that terror, that intimidation that authoritarians use against the vulnerable in their own countries to take over and to be a strongman. And that's why Congressman Espaillat and I, the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, introduced this bill, because this has no place in our country. And people don't know whether these are ICE agents or thugs. And in fact, there are more and more reports about people impersonating ICE agents with masks and plain clothes and saying they're an ICE agent. And a woman there was an attempted rape by somebody who claimed to be an ICE agent. This is dangerous. And that, as you say, is the point. They are trying to force people, not to come and to self-deport, because they simply do not want immigrants in this country. And I would work with them, as Chris Murphy and the Democrats did in the Senate a year ago, to come up with a comprehensive bipartisan solution to address our immigration system, which needs to be addressed. Nobody is saying people should just stream in to our country, jump the line, get access to everything, the healthcare and all the stuff that is offered in this country. Nobody's saying that. What we're simply saying is, don't terrorize and demonize immigrant communities when our economy depends on them and our country was built by them.
You have Senator like Tommy Tuberville saying about New York, we have inner city rats. And I'm not sure if he meant migrants or people of color, and that threatening if Muslims come to Alabama, that we're going to fight back. Just this in the last few days. I mean, listening to this rhetoric is chilling. And I wonder, my dad's an immigrant. He passed away 20 years ago, but he's an immigrant from the Middle East, Palestinian, came here for a better life. Your family decades ago came, uh, fleeing anti-Semitism because America stood for something special, regardless of our backgrounds, Muslim and Jewish. And I wonder if my father would come here now, if he was fleeing what he was going through there. And I wonder if your grandparents or great grandparents would have come to this country. And what the message they're sending is, if you're not just a white Christian right winger or something, you're not welcome here. And I wonder about this. I often now I contemplate this.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And, you know, Senator Tuberville is right. We do have a fair number of rats in New York City in the subways, and certainly that we now have a rat czar. It's a big problem, but those are rats, not people coming to this country to seek the American dream, to benefit from the greatest economy in the world. And let's not forget, our economy is the greatest in the world for two reasons. One, democracy, and two, that we welcome the best of the best from the world to come and benefit from our educational system and then build incredible companies and build jobs, create an infrastructure where anybody can succeed with an idea. And this administration is trying to take that away. Plain and simple. They are just trying to take that away and go back to the 1950s and earlier and effectively say that if you were not descended from someone on the Mayflower, you don't belong in this country.
And I think that the rub of barring black and brown immigrants, but letting in white South Afrikaners, it was like almost laughable. I mean, you can't be this on the nose. Like, yep, they are. But I'm glad you said immigrants are the best of the best. My fiance is an immigrant. I'm going to tell her, Congressman Dan Goldman said that you are clearly one of the best because you made it in here. And, it's, I'm glad there's peace in the Middle East. I have this weird situation where, my fiance, she's Israeli citizen, but Palestinian ethnically, and they're in bomb shelters when Iran's firing missiles. And, I have to worry about that way. I have to worry about my family in the West Bank. And in New York, it's still a breathing melting pot. Like, we have all these different backgrounds they're not simple. It's very conflicting going on. And that's why I like New York. So, I want to touch on last two quick things. One is a legal thing, because, you work so much. You were in DOJ, right? You were a federal prosecutor.
Yeah,
I remember.
10 years.
So, what's your reaction to the SCOTUS decision last week, barring nationwide injunctions, which really was one of the best things as a check on Donald Trump for things that were clearly unconstitutional, clearly illegal, and now that's stopped?
Well, what's really frustrating about it is, this has been used by both parties during different presidential administrations. The Republicans have identified a particular judge down in Texas, the Judge Kaczmarek, that they can get any case in front of because he's the only judge in that division of his district. And so if they file it there, it goes to him. And he's issuing nationwide injunctions right, left, and center. Mifepristone, as you might remember, issuing a nationwide injunction on that. The student loan debt forgiveness that President Biden tried to do. So this is not a Democrat versus Republican thing. The Republicans like to talk about how many more there are this time around. And they seem to ignore the possibility that the reason why there are so many more is that this president is so much more lawless than any previous president and is doing so many more things that are illegal. I do think that we need to streamline the process for nationwide injunctions. I think it should be a temporary thing so that it can be resolved by whichever final court it goes to, but done in an expedited way. Because one judge should not be able to hold in limbo a nationwide policy indefinitely. But if you are now forcing every single person who to go to court, him or herself, who's impacted by a policy, you're obviously going to miss a ton of people. It's going to be inequitable because the people who may not speak the language or can't afford a lawyer or don't know how to access a lawyer are not going to be going into court. But if it actually were to happen, can you imagine what would happen to our courts? I mean, it would just be overloaded. And so, as with everything that this administration does, they go so far overboard, and their quote solution to the problem creates so many more problems than what they're trying to fix. I mean, Doge, waste, fraud, and abuse. Absolutely, we should be streamlining and making
Mhm.
our government more effective. No question about it. That is really important. But that is not at all what they did. They threw keywords, green and diversity, into an algorithm and canceled programs based on which results popped up. That's not streamlining our government. And so even when they have a good idea that we would be happy to work with in a bipartisan way, they absolutely abuse it and destroy it. And that ultimately is destroying the fabric of our country and our government.
I love the fact that the opinion of the majority is like, well, you can be in a class action. We're all going to be like in 10 class action lawsuits. Yeah, I'm in that class, and that class, all on these other issues. It's going to be remarkable. So last thing, you're a congressman here in New York. When you Zoran Mondani today, you may have seen it. It's confirmed now as a nominee. But when you put Zoran and Brad Lander, I had them both on my show. I like both of them. Their progressive vision got such a big chunk of the votes, and it was about affordability. Both of them really plugging into that issue. Is there a lesson there? And obviously, every issue, there's not buses in every city. You can't do free buses in every city. But is there a message there for Democrats nationwide on talking about higher prices, about affordability, not being afraid of saying you're going to raise taxes on the wealthy to make sure they pay their fair share? Like, what do you see in the results here that potentially could be used for nationwide as we try to reach working class voters?
Look, it's not only here from someone from the very far left.
Mhm.
This is what Donald Trump ran on.
Yeah.
And he lied, but this is the sort of populist message that he ran on as well. And what it reveals is that our economy is not working for too many people. And there are a few people who it's working really well for, and the vast majority of people it is not working for. There are too many people who are looking at their parents and they're saying, I am not going to be more successful than they are. And as you say, your father immigrated here um, for the promise of you
Right.
really succeeding and
Mhm.
exceeding his success. And between inflation and between the increase in housing prices and construction costs and all of these additional costs that are not being matched by a wage increase. How long has it been since we increased the federal minimum wage? They're not being matched by other simple benefits. And so people are feeling squeezed more and more and more, and they want solutions. Now, I agree with very many of the policy objectives that Zoran Mondani has. What I worry about is that we have Donald Trump on the one hand, who's not solving anything for those struggling with affordability, who's actually making it worse. And then you have Zoran Mondani on the other hand, whose wish list sounds great. But the reality when you're governing is that these things are hard to pass. They're hard to make work because your budget is set. And the mayor of a city only has so much control over many of these things. And so, what I think that we need to do as Democrats is to identify these issues, but to be sensible and practical in figuring out ways that we can make things better. It might not make them perfect, but we got to keep moving forward. And the way you keep moving forward is to focus on solutions, focus on results, not focus on revolutions. And I'm hoping that if Zoran Mondani is the mayor, that he recognizes that if we make perfect the enemy of the good, these affordability issues will continue to get worse and worse.
Yeah, obviously, as mayor of New York, you're not as autonomous as people might think about issues. You have to go to the state to get approval for certain things. So, but the aspirational message, it gravitated, and young people came out in numbers. New York Times broke it down off the charts. So something is there. People want to be the idea. They want to be talked about the issues that are really affecting their lives, and they want to be able to dream of the American dream that me and you and others got to take for granted almost. They don't think it's going to happen for them, the younger people. And I talk to Gen Zers, it's just remarkable. They're almost depressed. I'm like, come on, you're young. You have everything ahead of you. And they see all these obstacles. So I think there's something bigger there. But Congressman, I want to thank you for your time, especially I know it's busy. You have to go back to DC and fight the good fight on that terrible bill. And I look forward to chat with you in the future.
Always great to be with you, Dean.
Take care.